Let's quickly welcome in Matt Orton, Chief Market Strategist at Raymond James Investments. He's with us. Matt, always a pleasure to have you with us on our shows. Thanks so much for joining in. And hey, we were just saying this. It's good to see a reversal in the headlines. India on a 5-day winning streak. The U.S. market has been cooling off. But actually, I just want to, get your sense on what you're hearing. This fall in U.S. big tech, is there something more to it than just some profit taking after a stellar run? Or do you see any new rumblings in the U.S. market as we get closer to the second half and those inflation concerns, some of those worries take over?
Hi, good morning, sir. It's always great to join. And it's been certainly the talk in U.S. markets of whether this sort of momentum unwind that we've seen, which has been pretty sharp and painful over the past few trading days, whether this is a trend or whether this is something that's very short term. I think this is more shorter term in nature. I was certainly encouraged by the price action later in the day today in the US that you started to see buyers coming back. But I think it's just a confluence of a number of factors. You had some of the really crowded, very, very small names that had recently IPO'd. They reported more disappointing earnings, and I think just highlighted that the market got a little bit too far ahead of itself. And so it just cascaded down to a number of tech names and a lot of profit taking and very thin trading in the US. But buyers are stepping in because one of the key themes we've talked a lot about before is using downside opportunistically. And I think you're seeing a lot of investors who have missed some of these names or missed being able to have exposure or increase their exposure to those names finally had an opportunity to do so. So I suspect trading will be choppy given all of the macro catalysts that we have with the Federal Reserve and speech on Friday. You've got the big US jobs report on September 5th. I think until we get through that, we'll likely see some churning in the market, but I don't think that's a longer term trend. And I've been encouraging clients, and I myself have been using that sort of downside to add to some of the higher quality tech names in the US.
I put out this factoid, right? NVIDIA is about 8% of the S&P 500, maybe a little less than 8% now. So highest ever, I think, going back 35 years now. Matt, news out of China, and by the way, the Shanghai has hit a 10-year high. So quite amazing there in terms of the move. And looks like there is a bit of a retail move building. Well, the mainland market anyway is driven by the local retail investors. And of course, but the other big thing out of China is this entire anti-involution, right? Cutting out capacities across the board, refining, chemicals. I think some petchem stocks are higher this morning. What do you make of it? And any implications do you see in any sectors?
Yeah, Prashant, I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that anti-involution policy from the government has been overlooked by a lot of investors. And you know how I think about China from the long term. It's just, I don't love China longer term, given a lot of their policies and refusals of the government to really take massive steps needed to get consumption going. But this is a marginal step in the short term to really help combat deflation. And I do think it will help boost corporate margins, at least in the short to medium term. So when you add that sort of policy to a lot of the big tech giants in China that have actually reported really strong earnings over the past quarter that look very, very cheap relative to some of the US AI tech names, I think putting all of that together makes it more of a compelling short-term trade in emerging markets. We'll see if that can last over the longer term, but I think investors are starting to catch on, and that momentum is just going to start to build over the next few months, I think.
All right. Hi, Matt. Morning. Good to see you. And as always, you have been quite optimistic on prospects of India. However, the last time around we chatted, you said you're not rushing in right now, going by the valuations and going that the globe is in a bit of a tizzy. That said, you must be buying select stocks. Name a couple of them for us.
Yeah, Nigel, I've been fortunate that even though the market itself has been down, a lot of the bigger names we've talked about, with the exception of ICICI recently, have done incredibly well. I mean, the jump you had in Interglobe and M&M, those have been really encouraging. Geo's done great. So when I've looked at this, I added a little bit to Eternal when it had sort of a pullback after its really stellar earnings report. I love the quick commerce business model. And so I would look to use downside there opportunistically. one name that hasn't really performed well, but I think leans into a very durable long-term growth theme, especially for India, given where it sits geopolitically, is defense. And so Hindustan Aeronautics is the name I've been watching closely. The fundamentals look very strong. Management execution is very, very good. The need for increased helicopters is there. So I think that's a name to potentially add to, just because the actual underlying fundamentals are quite strong. And staples is an area that started to run a little bit after the GST announcements last week. I'm still not convinced that the jumps in the names are there. The rationale for why they should start to run is there, but they've disappointed for so long. The fundamentals have not followed. And so what I want to see is at least a strong earnings report. I want to hear from management teams that the GST is actually trickling in to increase orders, perhaps their ability to increase margins. And then I think there could be some long-term durability. So I'd rather be later to that trade, but add to some of these, secular growth themes that are already in play right now, should we get any sort of weakness.
Matt, great speaking with you. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And speak to you soon again.